welcome everyone to another Pragmatic Institute product chat. This is the Pragmatic Institute webinar and podcast series where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product teams. I'm Eddie Gordon, courseware designer at Pragmatic Institute and today's host. Reminder as we start, if you've got a camera, turn it on. Great. We love to see your faces. That certainly helps in these times of only digital interactions. We like that. If you have questions during the presentation today, go ahead and stick them in there in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat board and toss those over to our presenter as appropriate. And then we'll reserve some time at the end as well for a Q&A session. So stick all your questions in the chat. I have to give a plug up at the top here for our new Pragmatic alumni community. We're very proud of that. The Pragmatic Institute online community is an awesome new resource for you, but don't take my word for it. Here is a quote from one of the newest members, the Director of Product and Development at Ultimate Software, who said, "It's a thriving community ready to help each other and offer perspectives and advice, as well as access to the many experts at Pragmatic Institute. It provides you with an alternate sounding board and a place to gain ideas from many product people across all industries." Don't miss out on that wonderful new resource. Find out information about it at pragmaticinstitute.com/community. Well, it's time to introduce our guest for today. Our guest is Managing Director and founder of the competitive intelligence and professional consulting firm Innovus. He's an expert at turning information into insight and then insight into action. He's an avid skier, we know that, and I happened to learn as I was looking him up, fluent in 5 languages, at least. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Marc Limacher. Marc, 5 languages.
Well, thank you so much, Eddie, for this kind introduction indeed, and nice meeting everyone virtually, of course, in this day and age. Yes, it is 5. I wouldn't say all of them superbly fluent, and you may probably say...
I'll have to shamefully ask that we conduct most of this session in English for my own benefit, unfortunately.
Good point. But just to clarify the accent I'm here faking, it is a very eclectic mix of Swiss German and English, otherwise known as Swinglish. It takes about 2 slides and you get easily used to it. So we can authenticate all of that with a yodel at the tail end of this presentation. So, you know, this is...
Oh, we're looking forward to that, for sure. For sure. Well, let's see, Marc. I prompted our audience to put some of their answers to the 2 poll questions in the chat. Those 2 questions being, what is your primary role and what % of your responsibilities include market or competitive intelligence? I'm not seeing too many answers yet in the chat, so our audience is shy this morning, but we'll warm them up. Between the 2 of us, we'll get them warmed up and we'll get things flowing. But,
Eddie, I'm also seeing a lot of people submitted privately.
Okay.
It's primarily product managers taking.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yes, product managers taking 0 to 10%, with a few in the 26 to 50% range.
There you go, Marc. Is that about what you were expecting, or is that new?
It is somewhat new. I was actually thinking more the middle range, to be honest, because in what we do for a living, we see quite often now that CI has been incorporated systematically from the whole life cycle of a product or a service, from product design all the way to go-to-market and post-marketing support and so forth. So it is low, but it basically just makes the case, and I think that's the essence of this presentation, to illustrate how you could really leverage CI as part of your day-to-day by adding value and by also giving high impact and high value outcomes and measurable results. So it's a good thing, you know, it makes the case easier for our presentation.
Beautiful. Well, we'll give you the remainder of the time is mostly yours, Marc. I will jump in if folks have timely questions, but we'll hand the reins over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Eddie, again for this very kind introduction. And thank you all for joining this webinar and investing your time into listening to what I would love to tell you and share with you in terms of kind of best practices, things we've seen from our Fortune 500 clientele in action, really, that they are leveraging and utilizing more so than ever during these highly unusual times that we are all living in. Because it's now a virtual world. Oops, sorry, I just was used to the old way of moving slides. There we go. And here are the objectives for today's session, really. The first one is to give you insights how you could anticipate opportunities and also detect competitors' weaknesses and strategies. So the goal is to be first to know and also first to act on fresh intelligence well before it becomes public information or quantifiable or is in the open domain. That's kind of the goal of adding value through intelligence. The second one is, of course, we want to share with you some tested and proven tools that our clientele is utilizing on a daily basis to achieve exactly that, to proactively anticipate not just market trends, but also customer and competitor risk and behavior. Again, just to be ahead of the curve and be able to shape the future and be coming in as a trusted consultant and partner to your clients. Then the bullet point 3 would be to give you insights when and how to use primary sources for CI. And of course, ultimately, we want to give you insights how to optimize the strategic and tactical impact of 3 tactical and strategic initiatives that our clientele has been really utilizing much more so than before the crisis. Those being voice of the customer initiatives, pre-sales intelligence, as well as win-loss programs, in a nutshell. And I'll move through these slides fairly quickly because we have quite a few here to share with you. So here is the age-old question: why would you want to invest time in this session? So what's in it for you? Here are the key takeaways. The optimization of go-to-market strategies and tactics should be a direct outcome of this session. We want to help shorten sales cycles and also help you up customer retention rates in those trying times by leveraging these innovative 3 initiatives I mentioned. Again, anticipation of competitor threats and opportunities through primary intelligence. We will also go into the cultivation of your own internal and external informant network, we call them. Goal here being that you are again at the pulse of fresh intelligence before your competitors are getting this insight or before information becomes public domain. Because at that point, everybody has access to it. So the competitive advantage has already disappeared. You want to be first to know. This one here is to maximize your product's life cycles and, of course, optimize opportunities that you may have at EOL, end of the life cycle, or in pharma lingo, loss of exclusivity when you certainly are faced with generics or biosimilar threats. So there are ways, of course, to extend product life cycles depending on your industry. And lastly here, we want to also give you insights, tangible guidance, how you can elevate your own visibility in these virtual environments that we now all operating by giving you intel in terms of how to implement these high impact and high value projects and initiatives. Those 3 I mentioned: voice of customer, win-loss, and pre-sales intelligence. Moving on, just very briefly, so you know who the heck we are. So as Eddie mentioned, we have been doing this since 1992. Firm got started in Palo Alto in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. Hence, we gravitated very much so towards the high-tech as well as the life sciences industries and healthcare industries. Those are the 2 that we are specializing in. We do a lot of strategic and tactical CI programs, of course, sales enablement, as well as win-loss tracking, as well as general systematic monitoring of services and of insights. Here is just a summary. We have basically 3 practices. One is the IT and telco group. A third one is the digital health group, which has really emerged over the past 8 to 10 years with the convergence of IT and healthcare getting into digital health, digital medicine, and e-devices. And of course, we have the life sciences group, which incorporates med devices healthcare services, hospitals, pharmacies, as well as big pharma, generics, and biosimilars. Those are the three specialty areas. We have some notable exceptions, but we tend to be specialists and not generalists in this line of work, which is more credible to begin with. Here is what we do, and these are the three areas we're going to talk about: tracking analysis, pre-sales, and win-loss. And a big thing to mention is that many of our senior analysts are coming from where you are sitting. So they have joined us from big pharma, big IT firms, and as such have high degrees of empathy with your pain points, your needs, as well as the kind of outputs and deliverables that you need. So empathy is one of our big priorities at Innovis. So looking at our world these days, we all face amazing challenges and uncertainties, as we know and feel every day with the current pandemic. It has become an extremely dynamic, complex landscape. Traditional models are completely in flux and disrupted at a moment's notice. COVID has clearly added to these uncertainties by disrupting not only our supply chains, but also the way we do business, the way we interact with customers, with partners, with channel members, and so forth. Our interactions in both the B2B and the B2C space, they have all changed fundamentally due to the pandemic restrictions that we all face. And this places all of you in highly unfamiliar territory, and you're looking perhaps for innovative solutions, how to have tremendous impact at your day-to-day jobs in this virtual environment. And this also means an increased rate and occurrence of disruption. So at the end, really what it means here is to find novel ways of doing business. So the new normal has clearly arrived. So we need to know much more insight, much more intelligence and information. We need to know it sooner, faster, and we want to have it in better quality than our competitors than ever before. So that's kind of the lay of the land that we currently have. So the solution really is to evolve the marketing strategy function with data-driven insights to support product strategy and innovation. So when I say data-driven, doesn't of course just mean syndicated information, public domain information. It predominantly means primary intelligence. Anything that becomes of value in terms of intelligence before it becomes public is of great essence these days, more than ever before, and will help you make a difference in your jobs. And lastly, of course, these quick and sustaining CI wins that you can be getting with tactical programs, particularly GTM strategies, win-loss programs, voice of customer, and pre-sales intelligence. Those are the things that are easily measurable, quantifiable, and also areas where you, in your function as product marketers, really can make a huge difference to your firm, not just by yourself being visible, now that we all work from home and making an impact, but also by helping the company grow new markets and grow existing customer relationships, maximize those relationships. Looking at data, there is the data spectrum where we all have access to hard data, which again, we all in perfectly efficient markets where everybody has access to the same information all the time, anywhere on the globe. It is information you do need as a foundation, but it is really just that, a foundation, because everybody has access, so your competitive edge is kind of limited since competitors have access to the exact same information. You can slice and dice it in many ways, yes. However, it doesn't give you this kind of soft intel that makes the difference. So these are oftentimes areas that are not quantifiable, and that they're not meant to be quantifiable, like statistically significant sample sizes. These are soft data bits that you pick up through your internal and external informant network that we talked about earlier. It could be channel partners, could be anyone in your value chain with whom you are cultivating a give and take relationship. So they share observations with you so that it alerts you of upcoming either opportunities or potential threats. And these are just some examples of how these outputs can look like, in what kind of form they can arrive. So the power of human intelligence, otherwise known as human, is really tremendous because it really goes deep. It goes into the whys and the hows of why, let's say, when you do win-loss, you may have not won a deal in a competitive bidding situation. You need to know this intelligence crucially so you can modify your go-to-market strategy, your sales motion, perhaps the way the technology vision is being communicated to a prospect, a number of things that go well beyond just price when you lose a deal. So that's what these primary human intelligence techniques give you by leveraging the art of solicitation, in terms of not solicitation, elicitation, in terms of how you get to this intelligence. And we go into that a bit later. But lots of it has to do with how you ask the questions, how you break the ice, how you get these sources to talk to you, to then really go deep into any of these topics that you see here under topic areas. And again, these are these soft data points that are crucial and give you early indications of upcoming challenges or opportunities. Can be either. Another way to look at the competitive advantage of knowing intelligence as soon as possible is the timeline on the X, on the horizontal axis, while on the vertical axis you have the number of possibilities. What are potential future outcomes that we are being faced with? So the sooner you know something, the more you are on the left of this timeline, the greater your time is, your advantage really is to shape the future. So here you see the inflection point where the present meets the future. If you are on the right of this inflection point, it's basically too late. You're playing catch-up, and as we all know, playing catch-up is very expensive, and you definitely are no longer first to market. So you want to be as far to the left as you can by anticipating potential outcomes. Here you see different indicators or signals to look out for that may indicate a trend. It may indicate your competitor's next move strategically or otherwise. It could be an M&A move, for instance, that you want to be able to alert your management accordingly and build scenarios, best case, worst case, realistic case scenarios in terms of likely future outcomes. And once you are closer to the inflection points, the number of possibilities, of course, do decrease because you become more confident in what the likely future will look like. So the number of possibilities decrease as you move closer to the inflection point where present meets future. So that's just a simplified way of giving you the rationale why early intelligence collection is so crucial.
Marc, do you have time for a quick question?
Yeah, sure, anytime.
We just had one pop in here as you're distinguishing between those two forms of intelligence, the soft intelligence and the hard intelligence. Should soft intelligence completely replace hard intelligence, or are they meant to be used simultaneously? Do they complement each other?
They do definitely complement each other. So you do definitely need the hard data. The foundation is really the hard data, your syndicated research, your statistics, your surveys with quantifiable results of statistically significant sample sizes. All of that is still needed. But soft intel oftentimes drives let's say, a survey, because you get an early indication of a trend or an opportunity or a threat that could really grow out of proportion if you don't intervene now. But to be fully confident, you may then want to launch a more quantifiable type study. That's then more market research and no longer intelligence. But clearly, the two complement each other. So I would never. Yeah. It's definitely, but as we saw in the survey when we started the session, the low percentage point of individuals utilizing CI is kind of, it is kind of surprising. It's very low because the soft intel points you can either generate on your own with these internal and external networks, or you could do that by leveraging a third party that is skilled in the art of elicitation to then get you the intel and also build scenarios, which we go into a bit later.
Beautiful. The only other comment in the chat so far is that they're looking forward to the yodeling at the end. So just keep that in mind for the end.
Oh boy, then I have to get some good schnapps to get me going on that one.
You're committed now.
I would say that, oh boy, usually it happens naturally when you ski down some steep mountains, but I'll try doing it sitting as well then. Just be ready. So another way to look at risks, and when I say risks, it could as well be opportunities, is to look at the actionability. Can we do anything about it? And predictability. So a good analogy, let's say, is if you classify risks along those spectrum, you can then easily differentiate a foreseeable risk. And a good example, of course, of a foreseeable risk would be a hurricane. You see that thing coming out there, it's spinning, you have time to prepare. So clearly, it would be a kind of risk that you can prepare for, especially if you went through it a few times, you get better at it each and every time it happens. On the other hand, if you have a contingency risk, a good example would be an avalanche. You don't see it coming, so you have no predictability, or a tornado. You don't really see it coming. You have very short notice to get ready for it, but you do have your actionability that is high, right? So let's say the tornado shelters at Denver Airport, clearly they're ready for it, but you cannot know when it happens. Same is true with business risks of all kinds. The nastiest ones are the stochastic risks that you just don't see coming. Think of earthquakes as an example. And of course, we could start a whole session just about the debate, what was COVID? What kind of risk was COVID? Some people would say acceptance risks for countries that went through it before. Was it predictable? Some will say, no, it wasn't. Others will argue, yes, it was. In China, we saw it coming. Others will place it in a completely different spectrum here. The bottom line is that the strategic risks are the ones that you really can do something about. You can try to anticipate them. You can plan for them in doing scenario analysis. And you will have enough lead time to do mitigation risk management. So you have defensive or offensive countermeasures that you can implement to counter such risks. So again, that's a simplified way of classifications of risks or opportunities. So looking at this whole anticipatory intelligence in action piece, we do have these three initiatives I mentioned. We have win-loss analysis, voice of the customer, and pre-sales intelligence. And all of these are very well done and also easily implementable because they're measurable, they're very specific, and you get instant results, which again, in this environment that we are currently operating in, management wants to see instant results and measurable results as well. And you can get those through win-loss and the other two as well. And it's really key in this virtual business environment we operate in to have tangible results and make your function even more visible. So let's get into the first of these three. We start with voice of the customer. And I would say if you have a budget issue, which one of the three to start with first, voice of the customer is definitely the one to go with. Because if you think of the old 80-20 rule, in this environment, you want to take care of your most crucial mission-critical customers first before getting into new business development mode or BD and sales mode. So whatever you can do to help them in these difficult times by being a partner, by ideally being able to anticipate their pain points, which again, in this environment may be brand new, net new to them, and you come in as the kind of the solution provider to solve their issues by doing a voice of the customer initiative, it really goes a long way. And as I mentioned from the get-go, we see these among our larger IT and pharma clients, and also healthcare clients in general. They have really initiated the VOC studies in a much greater scale since the beginning of this crisis for that very reason. Take care of your top-tier customers first, and you may even be able to grow the relationship by cross-selling, upselling, and modifying existing solutions, products, or services. And really, that's the big takeaway here. You will understand much more by after these initiatives how your customers are seeing not just your company, but also your competitors. Because the way you're going to approach that is through peer-to-peer expert discussions, which will then uncover strengths and weaknesses of your own solutions or products, but also the ones of your competitors through the customer's eyes. And you may also uncover unmet needs or underserved needs that can still be solved at this day and age, more than ever before. It may be pressing, but nobody spoke to your customers about it, so you may be the first one to do so. And it also will give you tangible opportunities to continue to differentiate your offerings. Could also be services that go with your offerings, support services, let's say, or professional services as examples. Clearly, there are some major benefits from a VOC initiative, clearly very cost effective. It can be done, we don't even need a large sample size because typically the storyline that you will hear is fairly consistent after the first 15, 20 discussions. You will have a very good handle of reoccurring themes, reoccurring pain points. It may, of course, differ by industry verticals if you are looking at your world in that way. So you can slice and dice it in any way that's appropriate to your industry and your space. Flexibility in questions. You can keep that extremely discussional and open-ended. So it's far from a survey that's very structured. It's actually much more the opposite because you really start an open-ended peer-to-peer partner discussion. And the last point is a good one, that it has the benefit that the results can be leveraged across multiple departments in your firm. And they will also be able then to help fund such an initiative. It's a much easier sale to ask for funding if folks are getting something out of it beyond just the product marketing or sales teams. And here's just a big overview of how it's done. So the big question clients typically have is how should we notify clients that we launch this initiative? So you can really launch it as a customer care initiative. Sometimes the sales rep, if they're very territorial, are the ones who want to announce that to their accounts, which it makes sense, that's fine. It's part of their relationship building approach that they will be contacted either by someone in your firm or by a third party like us about their likes, their dislikes, and all the other areas that you saw in previous slides. The discussion guide is really just meant as exactly that. It's a guide. It's not something that we will be sticking at. It's rather something that our interviewers will utilize to ask these probing questions or ask why a lot. Or they say, hey, can you give me a question to help me illustrate the point you just made? So the intel is going to be extremely specific. It's evidence-based, substantiated with examples. So you do know, you have a roadmap basically once that's done, where you want to put your either product development dollars, your go-to-market sales motion dollars, and in a prioritized fashion. So the output is extremely actionable with recommendations and next steps to address both the so what with implications analysis as well as the now what, which are your actionable recommendations. And here are just some examples. What are some of those questions that typically clients want us to ask or ask themselves from their top tier customers? This is clearly a bit more on the IT side here based on the lingo in those questions, but obviously this is easily transferable to any industry. Some more, soft information, perception issues, all extremely helpful. And even looking at next generation competitors that may not yet be on your radar, but they may have been contacted by smaller, even privately held companies that you may not have heard of, but that are clearly a threat, a clear and present danger that you can uncover through these types of discussions and interviews. So that's what we've got on voice of the customer. Now the next one is pre-sales intelligence. And again, in this day and age that we're living in, upping sales and upping retention rates of existing accounts is mission critical. So this is another of those initiatives where you can really measure the input that you're getting from those discussions by shortening the sales cycle, let's say, of your sales reps. They may come back and say, hey, since I have these battle cards that are based on intel from from pre-sales, intelligence, the ease of getting a new customer or winning a competitive deal has increased by this much percentages. So there are ways you can quantify the outcome of these initiatives of a pre-sales intelligence program. And it also gives you intel in terms of how you want to enter brand new accounts or a brand new vertical if you understand a target, not just pain points, but the whole decision-making process. Here you have just another few bullet points in terms of how you can prepare your teams with an understanding of what markets and accounts to target. So you can give them a prioritized roadmap by vertical industry, by geo, and of course by sales motion that's appropriate for a given account, which is all based on these in-depth peer-to-peer discussions. And in-depth guidance in terms of preferences, issues, hot buttons, likely budgets, legacy systems installed, and so forth. So very detailed intelligence before a rep goes into a prospective account to try to close a deal. So here we have just two of these benefits. We talked about that. It will help facilitate strategic planning in-house if you have this kind of guidance from these initiatives, as well as facilitated Marcom planning. So once you know what these customers or prospects are kept awake at night, it will help facilitate your go-to-market communication, your Marcom strategy as well, which is a tremendous benefit of these programs. Some more benefits that you get really perfectly qualified leads, so the likelihood of closing a deal based on this intelligence is growing exponentially. To the right, you have a Harvard Business Review stat that really gives you empirical evidence that pre-sales programs do result in tremendous ROI, and it allows you also to efficiently allocate resources when you manage those leads. So if you have, let's say, a team of pre-sales reps, combine that with a technical rep with more of an engineering background, let's say, or scientific background, that will join during the second or the third call to a prospect, all of this will come out as a part of these pre-sales intelligence programs. So it's very actionable and will give you a roadmap on how to tackle net new accounts in different verticals. We move on. To give you an illustration, in the pre-sales process, as you see, CI, which is in competitive intelligence, it really has a place in the entire cycle of the pre-sales process, as you can see here. So here you see market research, which goes back to that other question we had. It is integral, it's an integral part to a market research study that you need to do before you enter a new space, a new vertical, or a brand new geo. So Intel really plays a role across the whole spectrum here, as you see. In the end, you will come out with battle cards, with messaging guidance. The reps will know what kind of questions they should ask that will uncover the weaknesses of your competitors' solutions versus yours, and what kinds of questions to ask to do the opposite, to bring out strength, competitive strength that your solution has. So looking at the sources really that we can go to for pre-sales intelligence, there is a whole range, and this one is taken out of the IT space, where you see different types of sources. So they don't just have to be prospects, they can also be value partners in the value chain, like distributors, a whole range of people that have something to do, that are a stakeholder to your target prospect. And each of these will give you different types of intel. And in the end, in the middle, you see different types of competitive pieces of information that you usually want to know information about. So it's like a puzzle piece. Different types of sources give you different types of insights. And in the end, you put these pieces together and the story emerges. And it allows you to put together these either scenarios, if you do it for a strategic purpose, or tactically speaking, battle cards that you can hand over to the reps so they can close deals. So the intel can be leveraged in both ways, tactically and strategically. So much for pre-sales intel. The third one that's very tactical and at the moment in high demand amongst our clientele is win-loss analysis. Because now, of course, everybody really wants to hold on to their mission-critical tier 1 clients. And one of these ways to do so is to have a systematic, ongoing win-loss tracking program that will basically tell you, why did we lose a deal, or why did we win one? Equally important. And thirdly, there is a way to also find out what are deals where we were not even included as part of the final bidders, or even not even approached with an RFP or RFQ. That's equally good intelligence to understand why you were not even considered in the final selection of bidders. All of this can be uncovered by having these types of win-loss discussions. Here you see a list of topics that will come out. Again, it is mainly soft data, like we talked about earlier, but it gives you really good intel as to why a deal was lost. Usually it's, of course, much more than just the price, which is a common explanation many reps have to tell you. Usually it's much more. Of course, why is it done? One of the key elements is that you want to know why you win or lose, and it's also a quick ROI that it generates, because it typically then allows you to be more effective when approaching both existing accounts to keep them, new accounts to win them. And the reason why it's not done, you see on this side, oftentimes companies believe that they're already doing it, but it's just getting anecdotal intel or insights from the reps. And of course, that's usually not enough, because it could be subjective. So you do need an objective source of intelligence as to why a deal got lost or won. You may also see that there may be politics that prevents this from happening, because some companies think, oh, that's a witch hunt for our reps. And that's far from it, of course. It's not about blaming for having lost a deal. It's really figuring out how to optimize the go-to-market and the sales motion strategies in the future. Of course, then here again are the benefits. You have a higher account win rate. This is all possible to measure with stats if you do it on an ongoing basis. It also helps to shorten the sales cycle, and it will ultimately increase profits and revenues. I mean, that's really information and results that are quantifiable and measurable. It also helps with optimized solutions selling. When you have a complex solutions sale as opposed to a technical product sale, let's say, you got to know what the key trigger points are that prompt a prospect to give you the business. And it will make the solution selling perhaps a bit more complex, but it will help you optimize the sales tactics, the sales strategy, by having a clear roadmap and intelligence how your prospects are basically ticking, what their hot button issues are, and how their internal decision processes work, from the influencers to the gatekeepers to the budget holders and so forth. That's really what win-loss can uncover. It may also give you intel in terms of potentially wanting to leverage an existing channel to up the chances of winning net new deals. And it's clearly an early warning system in terms of intelligence by talking to these accounts regularly. And if you do it ongoingly, it allows you to do some longitudinal monitoring and statistically seeing the benefits of having done a win-loss analysis with shortened sales cycles and upped retention rates of accounts. So here you have it again, summarized. It really gives you intel why you really win, also why you actually lost. So there is a fairly detailed analysis on this. Sell against messaging is going to be optimized, as is going to be the positioning strategy as part of this initiative. It will allow you to de-emphasize comparative weaknesses that you have versus the competition, but also overemphasize your strengths and advantages in your Marcom strategy. And lastly, the gap analysis between sales and customers' perceptions. Doing this gap analysis on an ongoing basis, you can see how it has evolved, basically, how you can further optimize it. So all these matters are quantifiable and are very much actionable. The reason why it always works, we have never had an issue where people would have complained by having had not actionable results. It really does work. Again, the win rates go up, typically, because the outcome are not just battle cards, but even cheat sheets for reps, again, asking the right questions to bring out strengths of your solutions, but also the weaknesses of your contenders' solutions. It helps you understand the purchasing process over time, how it changes over time. And again, in these days, most companies, most targets, they did have fundamental changes in how they purchase products or services given circumstances. It does disclose misperceptions, perhaps, that these prospects have about your company, your technology vision, or your product or solutions. All of that will have to come out to allow the avoidance of miscommunications in your Marcom. And the actual performance comes out as well of the actual vendor or your company. And again, doing it systematically and ongoingly has more benefits than doing it as a one-shot deal. Here you just see a simplified way of how it's done. So first you want to decide which losses you want to investigate in depth. Again, this is a function of the sales cycle in your industry. Then you look at this interview guide, semi-structured. Most of it is open-ended to allow for peer-to-peer discussions. And usually doing these interviews, you leverage the advantages of investigative market journalism. So it's really all about breaking the ice, keep the discussion going, and probe deeply. Ideally, these losses or wins should not be older than, here it says 12 months. I would even say not older than 6 months. And the simple reason is that way respondents do still have a recall of the actual experience, the sales experience. How did your sales team perform? If it's too long ago, people may have changed, they may have forgotten, so the value is diminished of doing this initiative. Then you do the actual interviews, you do interim updates to the client, and in the end you build the implication analysis, the so what, and also the now what with recommendations. So it's just a simplified way of doing the process. Ideally, though, when you do start a win-loss process, it's good to also talk to your internal sources that were at the front lines at the time of a specific deal, or have a lot of interactions with prospects as well as existing clients, just to understand their points of view, which adds not just to the discussions, but also to the back-end analysis. And there may be gaps, actually, between currently held perceptions or assumptions versus reality once we talk to wins and losses. Again, here, do it as an ongoing tracking effort. It really adds more value for continuous process improvement over time, and it will help you optimize your win rates of new accounts and the retention rates of existing accounts. So if you do it through a third party, the big advantage is objectivity. You can do it blind. Of course, to losses, you always want to do blind for obvious reasons. Although we did have clients that benefited by having been disclosed. We had actually 5 instances where people were able to win back lost accounts because they were disappointed by the chosen vendor or supplier. So having done a win-loss, in this case, loss interview, allowed our clients to get back into a supposedly lost deal. Of course, that's the most beautiful outcome of them all, if you can do that. And then you have to determine the frequency, which is again a function of your typical sales cycle, as well as the type of accounts. You may say, hey, we need this many in this industry vertical or in this geo. If you look at your market globally, then you can structure it by different continents or countries, and then localize the approach accordingly as well. Moving on, optimization. Here we see some topics that can be included as part of those discussions. So you may then have a specific area of priority you want to initially focus on when having your first batch of wins and losses. And over time, you will typically have a constant set of questions that you will always ask, but then others may be situational. They may change depending on your product lifecycle, your competitive landscape, and so forth. So usually it's very dynamic and it changes over time. Here are a few more pointers how you can further optimize the win-loss process. Ideally, of course, you have individuals that know the talk, they know the jargon in your space, in your industry, to have meaningful, intelligent discussions. And they also have to be skilled and trained, again, in the art of elicitation to give you these evidence-based insights. Another big one here is actionable analysis. It has to be tangible. What comes out of these win-loss exercises has to be put into practice right away by your reps, ideally, or by your market planning team. And of course, this point is crucial as well, to repeat and to measure progress ongoingly, and to also modify your win-loss approach if and when needed. So measurable success, measurable output is crucial, and it can easily be done, and is being done. As you see here, we have a few templates uploaded on our website to get you started if you're interested, that you can download as some inspirations, I would say. At the moment, we are still uploading some of it, so it's not quite ready, but we will have it ready for you should you be interested. This is sort of the 3 programs in a nutshell that really at the moment do make the biggest difference when we look around our clientele, where they spend their marketing, go-to-market, and sales dollars, given the challenging times that we are all living in this pandemic. But you do have these instant results that you do not have in other initiatives or programs that are a bit trickier to measure, let's say, than any of these 3. So we talked about initially these pandemic times, how disruptive they have been and continue to be for B2B and B2C interactions. They challenge our dearly gotten used to business models and supply chains almost monthly. So we have to reinvent ourselves and think outside the box by reinventing these business models we got used to. Even our job descriptions have changed for that, just given the way we all work now, that we work in virtual environments. Therefore, the visibility is more important than ever to produce tangible and measurable, impactful results. But winners see in this crisis also opportunity. By having any of these 3 initiatives implemented, because you do have these instant results. First one, we talked about the VOC activities, Voice of the Customer initiatives, with the rationale being the 80-20 rule. You really want to take care of your most crucial customers first, now more than ever, to avoid defections and rather deepen your relationships with those critical customers. The second one we talked about was pre-sales intelligence to up the company's revenue, of course, and to also get into new space, perhaps, that may have emerged as part of this crisis that you did not even consider before. So pre-sales intelligence will give you the intel how to approach a brand new, let's say, geo, a brand new vertical, or a brand new category of client that is actually now more receptive than ever, perhaps, for your solutions and your products. And of course, the last one we spoke about, the win-loss. It's more critical than ever to figure out, well, why did we lose deals? Is it because of this new environment now that we are operating in? What do we have to change and modify to adjust to the new normal to help us shorten sales cycles and also secure client retention rates? So these are the 3 we wanted to discuss and highlight for you. And again, here you can find a bit more specific, tangible, and workable templates that you may utilize should you be interested in implementing any of these 3 on your own or through a partner. And the key takeaways here is also that you start cultivating your own network of informants. Again, information is power. The sooner you have it, before your competitors have it, the more likely it is you can act on it before it becomes public information, before it's quantifiable, and that's giving you this competitive edge we all aim for in our respective companies and businesses. It also allows you to assess risks and opportunities in a systematic framework, be that through win-loss or be that through pre-sales intel. And I think that's pretty much in a nutshell the key messages we wanted to give you during this seminar, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you may have, of course.
Beautiful, Marc. It's a big nutshell. There was lots of good stuff in there. We're tight on time, but we do have some good questions coming in. If you've got a few minutes to walk through some of these.
Sure.
One of the first ones that was from Anastasia, who asked, are there any free tools out there to help with gathering the soft non-public intelligence? And I think you just had a website up there with some tools and templates that people could use. Would you mind putting that up on the screen for us one last time?
Yeah.
So they can see what that was. Now, did you say that website will be up shortly? It's not quite up yet?
Some of it is already up, and you go in there, you register with the password, and you can download some of these templates. We are still building it up. We had some technical fixes there, I guess because of the virus, who knows. But we are building it and populating it with additional templates. So I think that's a good starting point that you can get some of these.
Good. So that's www.innovis.global/tools for those of you not benefiting from the video.
Yeah.
Beautiful resource. Thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Mark, we had a couple more sort of related to that. And Gina asked, can you elaborate on how pre-sales intelligence is conducted? Maybe just briefly walk us through what does that meeting look like? Who's there? What sorts of questions are asked?
Sure. So pre-sales intelligence oftentimes is being done under a cover of, let's say, we do a best practices white paper investigation in a given space. We would like to get your opinions and insights on best practices in selling solutions X to a company like yours. So you kind of open it in a very broad fashion, the discussion. And you typically have more than just one phone conversation or interview with a prospective client to get a good sense about who are the decision makers, what are their typical budgets, what are their legacy systems, let's say if it's in the IT space that they currently have installed, what's their typical cycle of changing infrastructure, again, technology we speak here. So anything really that gives you the tools, the insights you need for your rep then to go in there knowledgeably and being a provider of a solution to a problem which they have, which this kind of interview will also uncover, hot button issues, pain points, disappointments perhaps with their current solutions. All of that will come out in those discussions. And you don't just talk to the ultimate decision makers, but you also talk to the, let's say, the more technical folks who influence the decision to buy something. You talk to the perhaps the early adopters in a company that's known to be a bit more risk-taking and give a new chance, a product a first chance. So you may even want to pick companies that are known to be early adapters or innovators in your space to have these discussions with, because they can be excellent guidelines to give you intel in terms of how you should approach the mass of the market in your space. So that's usually how it's being done. It's really typically a blind interview, so you, the client, would not be known as being the sponsor behind it, because otherwise that influences the subjectivity or the objectivity of the outcome. And the sources are more willing than ever to chat. I should actually mention that since the crisis where people have been forced to work from their homes, in our line of work, it has been a benefit because people are more willing to talk about intelligence issues or topics that they usually wouldn't be so easily willing to talk to if they live in a large room office where they may be overheard. Now they're isolated at home and love to chat and share their opinions or likes and dislikes about something. So it made actually our life much easier than before the crisis, I have to say.
Mark, in some real-time feedback here, we've got a few people that are trying to log on to that template site. They're asking if there should be a download password. Do you know if there's a password to download those tools?
There is actually. Kathleen, if you're on, if you can hear it, I didn't write it down, but we can perhaps use in our team, because it is something we have developed last minute that I didn't write down the password. But that's something I can, either during this session, we can let you know.
If we can't get it immediately, we'll stick it in the notes, maybe to the YouTube version of this presentation, so folks can get in there.
Yeah, that's good. Let's do that.
Tools.
Let's do that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Here was this question from Mark, again related to who's in the room during these intelligence gathering sessions. Mark asks, how can you be the expert with the customer in a structure where the salesperson is a gatekeeper and much closer to each of their customers' business?
Well, the thing is that if you come in as a neutral, independent, non-salesy type of person or a third party to do these interviews, you are typically then also getting more objective input from the target company that you want to interview, be that win-loss, be that voice of the customer, or be that the third initiative we discussed. So that's the benefit of doing it with not your own sales reps, but rather an independent party that does it as an overarching white paper best practices type initiative. So therefore, folks are more willing to share very objective, unbiased inputs because they don't know who is behind that study. If it's your sales rep, by default, they give you subjective input for whatever reason. So I think that's the principal reason. Yeah.
And why would folks be willing to share in the first place? What's in it for them to come and give you all of this valuable information?
Sure. So now we're getting a bit more into tactics, how to go about it. So the best incentive for folks to share this information is to offer them an intellectual incentive. And by that, I'm talking about giving them a 2-3 page summary of an executive summary of key takeaways that their colleagues have responded to. So because everybody is interested in how their colleagues feel or how they see the future, let's say, in a given space. And if they are getting a key takeaway summary of these findings, in our experience, this is sufficient incentive to participate and to talk. And also, it's the elicitation techniques that are being utilized that get people to talk. Always ethical, always legal, but innovative and aggressive to have people giving you the kind of intelligence our clients want to obtain from these discussions. So there are clear guidelines and rules to the game in this line of work, but you have to be knowledgeable, of course, of the space, the industry, to come across as a peer to them. And you also have to be able to leverage these time-proven principles of investigative market journalism. So if you fuse those two things together, you are getting really in-depth and rich insights that are not obtainable in any other way.
Beautiful. We are out of time, and so I'd like to ask you just one last question that we like to ask all of our guests, Marc. But just for the sake of those folks who still had questions that we didn't get to, where might folks reach out to you if they have further questions on this topic?
So the easiest is this one right here in the left corner. That's something, and then either myself or one of our team members will get back to you with answers or examples, or even we can have a chat about topics.
So see, is it Marc, M-A-R-C, at innovus.global, right?
That's the one. Yeah.
Got it. Beautiful. Well, expect some questions in there from today's chat. I'm gonna wrap this up by asking you this last question here, Marc, that we like to ask our guests. It goes like this: if you were to have our audience today do two things differently based on what we've spoken about today, what would those two things be?
I think the first one clearly would be to integrate more of those CI disciplines we talked about in your day-to-day work or job. Because again, information is power. The sooner you know about an upcoming trend or opportunity or risk or challenge, not only will you be the one getting most of the brownie points in your organization because you're the first to know, but if you then carry that a step further and build a scenario, let's say, around it, and bring this up to management or any other of your relevant stakeholders, I think that's a win-win for the company and for you personally in your job. And the second one would be, in this environment we're living in at the moment, taking care of your top tier one customers first by leveraging especially the voice of the customer initiatives goes a long way to secure loyalty and even deepen those bonds you have with your most crucial customers. So those would be my two immediate ones. Yeah.
Wonderful. Marc, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your insights, for the valuable information that you shared with us today. I'm going to wrap us up by letting you know that you can join us next Thursday, August 13th at 1:30 p.m. for the next In the Product Chat series. We will at that time be welcoming Art Petty, leadership coach and creator of the Pragmatic Learning Network's partner course, Level Up. He'll discuss why you need to develop your influence to help your team. Join us for that one. Get some of those soft skills in there, right? And then, of course, in the meantime, if you've got a question, you can join us for every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That's when we hold office hours with a Pragmatic Institute instructor. Bring your best questions, and they will give you their best answers. Wonderful resource. Thank you, Marc. Thank you to our audience for your good questions. And everyone out there, stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see you again next time. Bye, all.
Thank you.